وملائكته خير ندب افتنه في
في أعمالنا. And we seek refuge from the evil within ourselves and the evil from our actions. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. Whomsoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides, no one can misguide, and whomsoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala misguides, no one can guide. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. I bear witness and testify that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah, and that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is his last and final messenger. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in his book, O people of faith, he makes a call. O people of Iman, fear your Lord, be conscious of your Lord as he should be feared, and do not die except upon the state of Islam, the state of Iman, being a Muslim. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. O mankind, he makes a call to us again, brothers and sisters. Be conscious of your Lord, whom of which created you from one soul, and from that one soul created its mate, and from those two created the many men and women. And fear your Lord, be conscious of your Lord, whom of which you ask your rights from, but do not cut the ties of kinship. For verily Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is forever watching over you. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. O people of faith, O people of Iman, fear your Lord, be conscious of your Lord, because if we do so, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised us a few things. يصلح لكم أعمالكم, He'll rectify our actions. ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم, and He'll forgive our misdeeds. ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. Whomsoever follows what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded in the ways of His Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam will have achieved the greatest of successes. May Allah make us of those who achieve success in this dunya and the akhirah. Brothers and sisters, in the last Jum'ah, we talked about this idea of having hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of strengthening our Iman and our faith, and building that relationship with our Lord. We mentioned that in our lives we'll have times where our faith increases, and there are times in which our faith decreases. As human beings, there's times where we're very motivated to do something. There's times when our khushu' was very strong. And there's other times when we get busy in our lives, when we get lost in the things that we do, our Iman might not be as strong. And things and time just flies by. And in today's khutbah, inshallah, we want to talk about not only strengthening our faith, but also thinking about how we can rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And how through reliance on Allah we can strengthen our faith, build that relationship with Him, and ultimately, with the month of Ramadan coming, in just a few weeks, come into that month with reliance upon Allah and with strong faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that we can take advantage of this month. When our faith is strengthened, brothers and sisters, one of the things that a believer has to have strong faith is a good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, husn al-dhann of Allah. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentions in a hadith narrated by Abu Hurairah where he says, Allah Almighty says, I am as my servants expect of me. If he thinks good of me, he will have it. And if he thinks evil of me, he will have it. When we live our lives, brothers and sisters, and think about our part in this dunya, and the things that happen to us. What is our perception like of reality? When something bad happens to us, do we think, woe is me, why is this happening to me? What did I do to deserve this? Or maybe when good things happen, oh, it was only me, I worked really hard for this, it was up to me, it was because of my efforts. What is our perception like? When we don't have the right perception of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we get confused in understanding how the things that happen to us and what they actually mean to us, how they affect us. When we have a good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we think about the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our creator, and that He put us on this earth to test us, to see who of us would be good, who of us would stand up to the things that happen around them and say, no, I'm not going to partake in this or that, in which does not please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who strives and struggles. When we don't have that correct perception of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we allow ourselves to be misguided very easily, to be lost and confused very easily, and to not understand that the things happen to us for a purpose, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we really believe in Him and trust in Him, has our good intentions in mind. But you have to have that perspective of having a good opinion in Him. And we won't be able to have that good opinion of Him if we don't know Him, if we don't have that relationship with Him, if we haven't made it a part of our daily efforts to make sure that we connect with Him, to think about what He's asked from us and what we're supposed to do, what He's promised us in His book and what He told us to stay away from. And with that, we get the correct perception of what this dunya really is. Everything that happens, everything that's placed in this dunya, the things that we can see and touch, we recognize that they're temporal in nature. They don't mean anything. They're here today, gone tomorrow. But what is it that will ultimately live past us when we die? Are the actions that we perform, are the seeds that we plant in this dunya for others to benefit from. And us saying on our deathbeds that we tried our best to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to stay away from that which He prohibited. To do that, brothers and sisters, we have to understand what tawakkul looks like and what it means to have tawakkul. To be able to rely on Allah, to have that good opinion of Him. Tawakkul has been mentioned that it is of three types. For example, when somebody relies on somebody else, it's because that person is trustworthy. They feel that that person can represent them in their best light, that they will look for their best interests at heart. For example, when you have a business and you give somebody a power of attorney, you're trusting that this person would make the right decisions for you, so that if something happens to you, if you're not available, that this person would do what is best for you and not just what's best for himself. That's one level of tawakkul. Another level is the trust that a child has with his mother. In the first type, what can happen? The guy could do whatever he wants. He could look for his own interests. He would make mistakes. But when you look at the relationship between a child and the child is at the mercy of the mother. They can't do anything for themselves. And they rely on the mother to do what's best for them. And the mother inherently, because that's her child, she struggled with this little baby, giving birth to them, that she would look for the best interest of this kid. She would take care of him, feed him, nurture him, make sure he or she has everything they need. So you might think, wow, that's probably the strongest level of tawakkul. No, the scholars mention another level. The level in which a dead person has tawakkul with the person that's washing his body. All of us is going to die at one point, right? Do we know how we're going to die? We don't know. Do we know who's going to take care of our body after we die? We don't know. So more than the baby, we're at the complete mercy of the washer of our bodies, or the one who's going to take care of our bodies. And the scholars say that that's the type of reliance a person should have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Knowing that the control is in His hands. And that we leave everything to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And obviously the tawakkul with Allah is greater than that, and than the examples that we mentioned. To have that reliance, to get to that level, to trust that you believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking out for you, that He wants the best for you, you have to have knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because what ultimately you're saying is that I trust and believe that Allah wants the best for me, and I show that not only internally, but also through my action. By worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by asking for forgiveness, by staying away from things that displease Him. And one of the ways to do that, like we said, is through knowledge, and the knowledge, for example, that will benefit us in this instance is understanding who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. We can't see Allah, Allah can see us. But Allah gave us access to Him, and in understanding Him, through His book, through the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and through learning His names. When you hear that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Ghani, that He is not in need of anything, He owns everything, He has everything, how does that make you feel? That I can go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ask. Because asking and getting from Allah will not take away anything from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He owns everything. When we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Qahiru fawqa ibadih, that He's the one in charge of all the affairs, Al-Wakil, the disposer of affairs, what does that show us? I know that I'm not in control, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control. These names aren't just there to be sung and to be memorized only, but to be reflected on and thought about. When we think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being Al-Basir, that He sees everything. He sees us struggling and striving. He sees us waking up for Fajr, even sometimes when we don't want to, when it's cold. He hears the prayers and the dua that we do. When you learn about the qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His attributes, that will give you hope in Him. That will help you rely on Him, and that will allow you to have a good opinion of Him. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد. Brothers and sisters, in the beginning we talked about trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the ways that we talked about on how to do that is through knowledge of Allah, building that relationship with Him, and having a connection to Him by reflecting on His names and attributes. When we have that knowledge, brothers and sisters, that knowledge grants us connection. Because now that we have the information to act upon. Knowledge is of no benefit if you do not act upon it. At that point, it's just information. It's just in one ear and comes out the other ear. But knowledge is that which benefits. Knowledge is that which you can use to better your life, to better your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because it is through that knowledge that we build connection, and through that connection we build reliance. But on the flip side, if we don't have that knowledge, if we're heedless, if we live our lives not trying to build that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it breeds disconnection. And disconnection breeds desperation. So that when those things happen to us in our lives, when we're in those tough spots, when we didn't build that relationship with Allah to rely on Him, and we try to rely on our own efforts, and we come short, we start to question, Those questions of why me, why this, why that start to come up. But when we understand that Allah is Al-Qahir, Al-Ghani, As-Sami' Al-Basir, then we understand that no matter what happens to us, if it's bad, it's an opportunity to come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If it's good, it's a chance to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look at that perspective of a believer. Everything that happens to them, he can point it back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? But we can't have that perspective without having the knowledge. Ibn Taymiyyah, rahmatullahi alayhi, says that the heart's neglecting to seek something, kind of further on this point that I just mentioned, and place hope in Him, leads inevitably to drifting away from the worship of Him. When we put our hearts on things that are temporary in nature, people, things, inevitably our hearts are going to go away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is especially so, he says, when one places his hopes in created beings and is diverted from placing his hopes in the Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thus his heart becomes attached to power, to armed forces, his followers, his servants, his money, his business, his family, etc., etc., who have already died or will die in the future, or will disappear, right? It is from, you could almost say, insanity that a person places his hopes in something that's temporary. If you know this car is going to break down eventually, or this thing is going to leave you, does it make sense to place all your hopes in this one thing? It doesn't, right? So place your hopes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the everlasting. Brothers and sisters, a lot of these things that we talk about up here in the minbar sometimes just become theory, right? And if we don't have actions or practical steps to apply them, we sit down Fridays, we come, we listen, or we say, oh brother, that's a nice, good khutbah. You leave this building and just, Assalamu alaikum, it leaves your head. So I want to share, inshallah, a few things that we can do to actually build taqwa in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and build that tawakkul in our lives. First and foremost, we have to make sure that we are constantly remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and making dua with Him with our tongues. They say dua is the heart, is the brain of ibadah. Musa alayhi salam, when he was going and he was lost in a strange town, and when he was helped by the two women, after he was helped and he struggled, he sat under the tree and he said, Rabbi inni lima anzalta ilayya min khayrin faqir. He prayed out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, Oh Allah, I am truly in need of whatever good you may bestow upon me. Look at the words of Musa alayhi salam. He understood that goodness and rizq only comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also understood that he is faqir. He understood his place. He is at the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the perspective that we should have. Another ayah that's mentioned, or dua that's mentioned, is Hasbi Allahu la ilaha illa huwa alayhi tawakkalt wa huwa rabbul arshil azim. When you recite this, Hasbi Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is enough for me. You're reminding yourself of your place, and you're putting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His proper place. Allah is enough for me. La ilaha illa hu. There is no one worthy of worship except Him. He is the one and only. Alayhi tawakkalt. I trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I trust in the one that's everlasting, the ever living. I trust in the one that's enough for me, that owns everything. وَهُوَ رَبُّ الْعَرْشِ الْعَظِيمِ. And He is the Lord of the Arsh al-Azim, the magnificent creation of the Arsh. If He is the Lord of such a magnificent creation, He's also the Lord of me. He's the Lord of everything. These du'as that we've maybe learned as kids, or just say in passing, when we reflect on them, brothers and sisters, they have deep meaning. It's not just something you just Repeat, say again and again. But reflect on what you're actually saying. And also, brothers and sisters, like we've mentioned, reflect on the reality of things. The Quran says, and this dunya is nothing but an illusion, multiple times. The Quran says, successful are those who cleanse themselves. The Quran says, the akhirah is better and everlasting. These ayats that we've read constantly, they have depth to them. Allah is pointing to us and reminding us that this dunya that we're so deluded by, that we think we're going to live here forever in, it's going to go. The akhirah is everlasting. Remember, connect with me, have that relationship, because you're going towards a place in which now is your chance to make amends and do the right thing. The people who are successful are those who cleanse themselves, not the ones who just live their lives not thinking about their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Reflect on the ayats of the Quran and think deeply about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is constantly reminding us of. To rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of the things that we can do is give sadaqah. One of the hardest things for a human being is to give from something that he felt that he earned with his hard work. Right? And when you recognize that rizq is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that exercise of taking out the love of money and giving it to those who need it helps you understand that this money, you're just a representative or the person in charge of it at that moment, and that you don't own it. And as part of our religion, we have to give zakah. It was made fard on us. It's up for us to remember that this rizq, it was given to us and we have to give it. So remove that love of it from your heart and recognize that everything's in Allah's hands, and hopefully that will help us understand and how to rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ultimately, brothers and sisters, what tawakkul is, if you really distill it and boil it down to its basics, is understanding your place and understanding the place of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when you can understand that, you'll be able to rely on Him. Brothers and sisters, let's strengthen our faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Trust in Him and His decree. And remember His mercy and be optimistic of Him. Especially as we go into the month of forgiveness and mercy and freedom from the hellfire. This month of Ramadan that's coming up in just a few weeks is a month for us is a chance for us in this month to go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to build that trust in Him, to have a good opinion of Him. Read about what happens in this month and prepare yourself mentally and physically to take advantage of this month so that you can come out of this month a better person, a better Muslim, and a better believer. Let's make dua. Allahumma hdina fi man hadayt, wa afina fi man afayt, wa tawallana fi man tawallayt, wa barik lana min al-khayrati fi ma a'dayt, wa qina wasrif anna sharra kulla ma qadayt, fa innaka taqdi wa la yuqda alayk, fa innahu la yadhillu man walayt, tabarakta rabbana wa ta'alayt, wa laka ash-shukru ala ma a'tayt, wa astaghfirullah wa natubu ilayk. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين وأذل الشرك والمشركين ودمر أعداءك أعداء الدين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا وأقم الصلاة. الله أكبر.